Hey, listen, thank you, Billy, for that. And you get the weekend off. You don't even have to do this on Monday. We're going to have a much easier week next week. Now, listen, when we come back from this short, well-deserved break, we're going to be joined by, and I know we never do this in the 6 o'clock hour, but we found a candidate for office not from the metro area who says, I want to come on and tell people why I'm so crazy to want to jump into a state Senate race. It seems insane. I don't understand why people do things like this, and that's coming from a guy who did things like this. His name's Matt Solomon. He's running from out there in the northwest part of the state. We're going to hear from him and try to figure out what makes him tick right after this break. Until then, it's George Brachler on The George Show. You're listening to 710 KNUS. It's Funky Friday right here on The George Brachler Show, 710 KNUS. Going to go to the VIP line. Many of you know that politics is in the air. It's that season. We're heading into the sprint in the post-Labor Day period. November could result in big changes nationally, maybe even at the state level. As you know, the Democrats are in charge of every single lever of state government, from AG, Secretary of State, Governor, both houses of the legislature, and so on. The VIP caller we have on the line right now wants to change that, or at least to help change that, and that is to try to help win the Senate back and get us back on track. He's not from the metro area, though. This is a guy who hails from another part of the state, I think attesting to the broad power and reach of the George Show. On with us right now, Matt Solomon. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good morning, George.
Thanks for joining us. Tell listeners right now, where are you living? I mean, not like in a tent, but like what part of the state?
I live in a house
in
Eagle, Colorado.
Keep going. More detail.
And it's Senate District 8 is the northwest corner of Colorado. So it stretches from Blackhawk, Central City, the western edge of Evergreen, all the way west to Utah, and Eagle and Summit County north to Wyoming. It's a big district.
That's a giant one. And you've got some ski country in there too, then, it sounds like.
We've got almost every source of revenue of the state of Colorado in this district, George. We've got water, mining, mineral rights, tourism with skiing, hunting, fishing. Its outdoor rec is big. It's a fantastic district to live in.
This is a pickup opportunity for the Republicans. It was redistricted along with every other Senate and House district after the last census. Just based off of raw numbers, tell us about how competitive it is.
It's very competitive. It's roughly half the district is unaffiliated voters, and the remaining half is split between Republicans and Democrats. So it's a competitive race, and I think we've had enough bad decisions in the last 4 years that it really does give us a competitive edge.
Before we talk about sort of why you are displaying your mental illness by running for office on the air, before we do that, I want people to get to know how we got here to this state of being broken. Tell folks about your background.
I've lived in Colorado for 26 years. I grew up in Northeast Florida and went to college, played football in South Carolina, and moved out here.
Like Gamecocks, South Carolina?
No, Wofford College Terriers, South Carolina.
What was your position?
Small 1AA school.
What'd you do? Backup punter?
I was an offensive tackle.
Oh, what? Buddy, that's brutal. That's contact every snap. You don't get that with every position, man. That's in there.
You know, as Coach told me my freshman year, he asked me if I wanted to play fullback or tackle, and he said, you can either be fifth on the depth chart and have a chance to get a touchdown, or you can be second in the depth chart and cut people's legs out from under them all day long. And I said, Coach, let me play.
This whole this is helpful, man. This helps us to understand why you would get involved in politics, which is also full contact all the time. But go on now. Tell us more.
So I moved out here to ski and snowboard in the winter, and I skied, and my liquid addiction kicked in, and I became a year-round kayaker and stayed. I've got a chosen family in Colorado, and I really do love where I live.
So far, this is the exact path every politician takes to politics. College football, kayaking, skiing, snowboarding. And then what? What happened after that?
Well, George, I skipped your step of the Army, and I postponed that service till later in my career when I served your cohorts as a subject matter expert and medic.
Oh, that's
but
great.
I did the raft guide ski bum thing for a while, and then became an EMT and a paramedic, and became a sponsored kayaker. I kayaked for Dagger Kayaks for years, and was one of the pioneers of paddleboarding. And through that, launched a couple of companies internationally and a couple of my own here in town. So I mixed my public service with private sector industry.
You said you became a paramedic. Why? Why would you go from the fun stuff to that?
Because it helped pay for the fun stuff.
Oh, good answer.
Back at the time, I was a raft guide, and we got, I think, a $5 or $10 per trip pay bump to get our EMT. And I was wrapping up my EMT class, and we were paddling this Class 5 stretch of whitewater, and a friend of mine who was a paramedic looked at me and said that they needed EMTs on the ambulance. And after laughing at him and saying I didn't want to work in a box, I went and did a job interview and got hired and spent the next 10 years of my life working on the ambulance.
And what'd you do after the ambulance thing? Or are you still doing that?
Nope. I transitioned. I opened a small retail shop in Eagle and sold that business 4 years ago. And for the last 12 years, I've consulted and worked with the military doing pre-deployment trainings. And after I sold the retail shop, I dove head first and worked 2 weeks every 6 weeks doing off-road driver training and recovery to our military forces.
And none of it's making any sense to me. I get all the things you're doing, but I don't understand how we got into the whole, hey, let's go and represent my community and government thing. How did you get there?
It just happened natively, George. I got involved locally. I helped start the Whitewater Park project here in Eagle, which launched and is a huge success for our community. And through that process, I was asked to run for town council. So I was elected twice to town council and got a taste of service to the community at a different level. And running at the state level, I've been asked to do for years. I've spoken before Senate subcommittees and helped with legislation behind the scenes in the past. And I've turned it down every time because I still, I didn't have enough head injuries to say yes at the time. And this year it was like the 5 rights of medicine. The stars aligned and the timing of when I was asked and my level of wisdom and maturity and my ability to be able to give my all to this all aligned. And here we are. I'm really excited to take another step in my public service and to represent this district.
Now, you say another step. I presume paramedic is part of serving the community, but you've been elected to something before.
I was elected to town council twice.
Which town?
Town of Eagle, where I live.
Yep.
And I work with a couple of nonprofits on the side behind the scenes, and one of them we do a toy drive for the kids in the community, and we have a second chance scholarship for people trying to get their life back on track. And another nonprofit, we offer medical services and safety to a local community. So being involved, I'll tell you, the more I'm involved, the more I fall in love with where I am. There really is a selfish reward to giving.
I get that. Do elected state senators get free ski passes to the mountains? Because then it all makes sense to me. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it depends on how you vote at the Capitol regarding the ski industry. You're going to have to probably step off of those votes just because of your conflict of interest. I'm kidding. Matt Solomon, who is the Republican nominee for Colorado 8, it is a giant state Senate district in the Northeast. It's currently occupied by a guy named Dylan Roberts. Is that fair?
No, it's not fair. He currently sits in the House seat.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So he's elected in that district, but to a much smaller seat, and now he wants to be the state senator. Now I've got it.
Correct. He's wanting to take a step up the ladder of his political career. This Senate district is a combination of Senator Rankin's district and Senator Donovan's district. They combined them and split them north-south. So Senator Rankin is moving to Senate District 5 in January, and Senate District 8 is an open seat.
Got it. Okay, that even makes it more competitive because an incumbent, as you know,
yes,
it's a much tougher thing. One of the things that you've done, which is ridiculous, in my opinion, is to have written a book about your life, but you included all of the mistakes in your life. You're supposed to write a book where you swoop in and save a bunch of kids from a burning bus. Maybe you've defended a bunch of nuns from an attack by communists or something. Your book doesn't do that, man. There's other stuff that you put in there. Tell us, one, why did you do that? And then I want to talk to you about what you put in there.
Well, I was teaching a class on resilience with a group of friends last year. We were teaching resilience to some high-end executives and leaders. And a new friend of mine I met on this class a few years ago, he and I spent the off hours talking about mindfulness and leadership and life. And he put it in front of me that I had to write a book last year. And I resisted and fought and sat down and asked him what he wanted me to write it about. And he said, mindfulness. He's like, write about mindfulness and write about leadership. And so I started to do it. And then I realized I'm not George Brachler. I don't have degrees.
And you're welcome.
I don't have this huge, yeah, but I don't have any PhDs. I'm a Matt Solomon. I'm just, another guy off the street. And I told this to my friend. I was like, I don't have any bearing to write a book on leadership. He's like, Matt, just start writing. So I just started writing, and I just opened up. I was vulnerable. I tried to be as honest and forthright as I could, and telling how I learned the lessons that I've learned over the last 48 years. And this is what came about. I took the stories I wrote and vetted them with all the people that were involved to make sure they were accurate and honest. And I don't know if you know Jocko Willink. He wrote a book called Extreme Ownership years ago.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Listen to it on Audible.
There's a paragraph in his foreword that he says once people stop making excuses and stop blaming others and take ownership, we're compelled to take action and solve our problems. And I think that writing this book, Fortunate Accidents, was my step of taking action and solving my problems and putting the pieces together. And it really opened my eyes, and it surprises me the feedback I've gotten. I've had vets with PTSD tell me how it's helped them get over some of their traumas. There's high school classes that are using my book to teach leadership. It's really been, the feedback on this book has been a huge compliment.
Well, let's get to the resilience thing. Matters to me too. It's something that the military is big on in a way that it never was when I first put on the uniform. I don't think resilience was even a word in the lexicon or vocabulary at all, but now it is. It's a big one. I know it's true too, because being a prosecutor and being in charge of people who handle some of the worst facts, pictures, videos, cases, they need that too. But I want to get into some of the stuff that you talked about in there. Tell us about some of the mistakes you made and how you bounced back from it.
Of course, you go straight to the mistakes.
Of course, buddy. That's the title of the book. The title of the book begs you to do that.
Where do I start?
I don't know, man. I mean, let's start with college. I'm sure everyone's made mistakes in college. The difference is, unlike you, nobody tells those stories unless they're at a bar liquored up.
I didn't go to college in Vegas, so I guess I assumed those rules didn't apply.
It doesn't apply.
Probably the first big lesson I had, and I used it to outline the chapter on awareness in the book, was when I was suspended for 4 games when I played football. There was a band playing at a fraternity house the night before a game, and I took a 6-pack down for the band, and it was before curfew. I figured I was good to go. Curfew hadn't hit yet. Dropped it off, was walking back to my dorm room, and there was a senior, this was my junior year, who had a concussion and couldn't play, so he was hanging out, but also a little disgruntled. Saw me carrying the 6-pack, and before the game the next morning told the coach I was drinking that night before the game. And coach looked at me, and anybody that played with me and knows Coach Ayers knows that when he asks you if you're a special kind of stupid, there's a certain twang to his voice that rings loud.
Yeah, that's great. Were you a special kind of stupid?
I've definitely been special.
Yeah.
Coach Ayers reminded me that on a daily basis during season. But no, he suspended me for 4 games, and I was livid. Took my 4-game suspension in stride, and then January rolled around, and he called me up, offered me my starting position back, and I declined and was going to move on. Some friends of mine were starting a business that I probably should have jumped on the opportunity. They all blew that business up and retired in their late 20s, early 30s. And I decided that if I didn't finish college, I know, right?
The judgment that you have displayed thus far, and you've put it in print. That I think the book could be subtitled "Don't Be Me." So far,
right?
But I
Learn
appreciate
from my
you.
mistakes.
Yeah.
And don't repeat what
So
I've
these
done.
guys are all on a beach somewhere, and you've made the decision to run for an office that pays what, $35,000 a year, and to do it you have to run through a political wood chipper. Let me say this: I'm going to guess that the decision to not come back to football was in part a prideful one, and I get that, man, especially at that age when you're in your early 20s, late teens. For dudes, man, pride is a big deal, and you end up making decisions that are so short-sighted. Matt, if you don't mind, I want to carry you over for a break because I want to hear about more mistakes. That's what I like. But I just want to share one with listeners, too, and that is when I was playing high school football, not nearly as gifted as Matt was, there was a day, I was trying to get into Annapolis, right, and I got nominated to all 3 academies, Senator Bill Armstrong, Congressman Dan Schaefer. It was awesome. And my heart was set on Annapolis, even though I'm an Army man now. I was born again. I get it. Annapolis was my goal. And I got a letter in the mail one day, and that was back when everything came in paper. This was before Al Gore invented the Internet. And it was a letter saying, you're disqualified medically because you have a color impairment in your eyes. And that was when you go to MEPS, the MEPS station, the military entrance processing station out there at the Customs House at Denver, about 19th and Stout. You do this color chromatograph. There's a bunch of different colored dots, and you have to say what number it is. You know what I mean? Like, that's a 4. That's a 32, like that. Well, there's a bunch of colors where I looked at it. I said, there are no numbers. And they're like, no, there's a number. And they trace it with their finger, and I'm like, uh-oh, that's a problem. And so the Navy said, you're disqualified. And I remember that day, and I had to go back from home after school to go to football practice. I was so down in the mouth, and I was so bitter, and I remember blaming God and saying, why would you put this thing on my heart and then take it away from me? And it was woe is me and all of this self-absorbed nonsense that I still struggle with in my late 30s where I'm at now. That's not actually true. And I didn't go to practice. Instead, I sat in the living room weepy and mopey. And then I went back to practice the next day. Coach calls me in after practice and just very matter-of-factly asked, like, hey, what happened yesterday? Where were you? And I said, well, my dreams were dashed on the rocks of reality and the eyes and the color. And I told him the whole story, and he's like, yeah, man, that really sucks. You're not suiting up this week. And I'm like, wait, I don't know if you heard the sincerity in my voice, but this was a big deal. This was a blow to my dreams. And he's like, no, I heard everything you said. But here's the deal, man. You signed up to be part of a team, and you let your team down. So I don't think you need to be part of the team on the field this Saturday. Hopefully you learned a valuable lesson. I'm telling you, man, that was a gut punch of epic proportions at that age. I think it was 17, 18. I remember that story 40 years later. Well, it's not really 40. It's more like 20, but you know what I mean. Many, many decades later. And I'm like, I get it. I get it, man. And so I let my little pride and my wounded ego get in the way. And that's what I'm hearing in the decision not to come back to football. So that resonates with me. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm never going to put mine, though, out in public. I'm not going to tell that story in public because it's embarrassing. But you did, and I appreciate that. Listen, can you stick around for another few minutes? I just want to hear more mistakes. Can you stick around for a few more minutes?
I'm all yours, George.
All right, buddy.
Thank you.
That again, another mistake right there. Matt, thank you for joining us. When we come back, it's Mistakes with Matt right here on George Brachler, The George Show, 710 KNUS. Funky Friday right here on 710 KNUS. Holy smokes, how did we get to 654? Billy, I've got like 15 seconds left. Let's do this. I'm going to bring up Matt real quick here. Hey, Matt. Matt Solomon,
Yes,
Republican nominee for Senate District 8. I have mismanaged my time in a way that is really inexplicable. It leaves me just about less than 2 minutes. What I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is to bring you back after the top of the hour. We don't have to do a full segment. I know how busy you are, but I would love to continue this conversation at least through the first few minutes of the top of the hour. Can you do that? I have just butchered the 6 o'clock hour.
Absolutely, George. Thank you.
In fact, you know what you could do is you could drop off and call us back so you don't have to be on hold through this break. We'll talk about it off air or something like that. But Matt Solomon, hang on with us. Tease us if you would. Give us a couple thoughts as we're getting into the 7 o'clock hour. What are the areas of mistakes that we're going to talk about? School, women, employment, politics? Where
I
are we going?
categorized them: awareness, mindfulness, resilience.
Oh.
The lessons I learned. The book was about growth, not about mistakes.
Oh, well, I'm interested in the mistakes part. Of course, we'll talk about the growth. I mean, everybody wants to hear about the growth. But I think really what people want to know is this guy's running for office and he has put into a book his mistake. I love it. I wish more politicians would do it. I'm anxious to get to them, but I've got to do it at the top of the hour. Can you hang on with us?
Yes, sir.
Hey, that's Matt Solomon, Republican nominee for Senate District 8. If you're not familiar with Matt or that district, it's because it's the northeast part of the state of Colorado. And he said everything from like Black Hawk all the way to like Craig, Colorado, and a bunch of stuff in between. That's huge. I don't know how you would manage a campaign over that size. Yes, I did the statewide thing, but that is kind of ridiculous. We'll get back to Matt in just a little bit. And then I want to get into some things that took place here. President Trump made some comments about the January 6th people being prosecuted. There was an outcome in a January 6th prosecution. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to get into all the Biden sound from the speech you likely did not listen to live, if at all. I did. And I'm going to share that with you when we come back. But we're going to get caught up with Matt Solomon. It's a Mistakes with Matt at the top of the hour when we come back. Until that time, it's me, George Brachler, on The George Show, 710 KNUS. Happy Funky Friday to you right here on The George Show, 710 KNUS. And by we, I mean I completely mismanaged the 6 o'clock hour after a awesome You Choose the News segment, which loved the banter with Billy, took a little long. I then took our next guest a direction I imagine he was hoping we wouldn't get into that much because he wanted to talk about I'm running for the 8th Senate seat out there in the northeast part of northwest part of Colorado. And we ended up having a conversation about a book he wrote and it's about resilience, honestly. And there's some mistakes in there, and I was hoping to talk with him about that. And I cheated him out of the opportunity to talk about that as well as where he wants to go with the seat. Now, I know he's busy. I do not intend to keep him on for the rest of the morning, let alone the entire first segment here. But I did say stick around, Matt Solomon, Republican nominee for Senate District 8. And let's continue to have at least a brief conversation about all of the things you've done wrong in your adult life. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to go there. But tell us something else that's as part of this resilience discussion that you've had and that you continue to have with pre-deployment folks and the military and others. Tell us about that.
Probably the launch pad to me learning the lesson on resilience, George, was that second big crossroad in my life about 12, 14 years ago when I was at about the 9-10 year mark and working on the ambulance. And I chose to end a career because I got too relaxed in the station. I talked and lacked a level of professionalism that was expected and joked with everyone and just took the banner too far. I've made mistakes, but nothing unethical or immoral. I engaged in conversations I should have walked away from.
When you say banter, listen, I banter all the time here with Billy. Some of the stuff I say on air here is questionable. It's FCC compliant, but questionable. Who's in the? Is it a firehouse? Is it a paramedic house? Is it what do you guys call it?
It was the ambulance station. It's a mixed group. It's all of us. We basically lived there.
By mixed, you mean Republicans and Democrats, or what do you mean?
Oh, men, women.
I get
bosses,
it. It's co-ed.
Employees.
It's co-ed.
It's co-ed. Yeah, exactly. And I relaxed, and I was exhausted and burned out, and all that aside. But we go back to owning our mistakes and not passing blame. And at that point in my life, everything I did was everybody else's fault. And I was full of a lot of blame, and the end result of that blame and the end result of the poor decisions I made by engaging in conversations I shouldn't have engaged in, I chose to walk away. And at that point, that was a big part of my identity.
Hey, that's tough. That's a 10-year thing.
It took a bit. And I had the good fortune of having a girlfriend that was my soon-to-be wife and then soon-to-be ex-wife, but she fully had my back, was the best support group somebody could ask for. And I recovered. I took that downward spiral and turned it back into an upward spiral, took the education I gained growing up in a family business and with her encouragement, I started my own retail shop and found that a lot of the supplies and the gear that first responders up here in the mountains and in northwest Colorado needed, we couldn't get up here. We had to go to Denver. So I created a resource where we could get uniforms and safety gear and so forth locally in the Western Slope. And it helped our economy and gave me a stepping stone where I could contribute to a profession that had given so much to me.
Matt Solomon, Republican nominee for the 8th Senate District out there in the northwest part of the state of Colorado. I was hoping for something more fun. That one sounds tough, man, ending a 10-year career. But here's the other thing. I want more politicians to tell us in advance things like, look, this is how I got to be me, right? Like I'm not a zero defect person. I think we're way past those days. But it just feels like we never get that. So I appreciate that. I presume, by the way, who your political opponent, Dylan Roberts, I just presume then that whatever mistakes that you have talked about in public, they'll try to spin to be something like, and let's get him, and that's why we. But let's do this in the last couple of minutes we have together. Tell us, as you are trying to get into the Gold Dome on the Senate side, and so is Dylan Roberts, who is a longtime House member out there on the Dem side. What's the difference between the two of you? I mean, what is it you're going to try to accomplish there in the legislature? Why should people want to give Mr. Resilience a chance?
Well, our economy needs a little resilience right now, George. We are sitting at the highest inflation in the country, and it all comes back to the cost of energy. And we have a House rep that's voted to shut down industries in this district with a date, but without a plan. And the difference in wisdom and knowledge is learned, and it can be used good, bad, indifferently. But wisdom requires experience coupled with knowledge so that you can see the ripple effect of the decisions you make, and you can understand the perspectives of your district and the long-term effects of pretty titles on bills. And that's what I bring to the table is this resilience piece, this wisdom of having lived a life with experience in multiple industries. I have an understanding of what our district is asking for and the consequences of decisions that are made in Denver. So it's definitely a big government person versus a responsible business owner that cares about this district. Our government, since Dylan's been in office, has grown 25%. $8 billion is in the budget has increased. And that's too much. My savings accounts dropped 25% because of this.
What?
I don't know about yours.
Yeah, I try not to look at any of the investments, man. The investments give me the heebie-jeebies. I can't look anymore. I mean, with the stock market roller coaster that was going on and the hits, I can't do it.
Yeah, so the value of our dollar is not what it was, yet our government just keeps growing at the state level. And we need a government that fosters and enables us to succeed, not that regulates and micromanages our every decision.
Matt Solomon, let me ask you this. Dylan Roberts, I know Dylan, not well, but I know Dylan because he is a, part-time prosecutor in the 5th Judicial District, which includes Eagle County, Summit, and I can't remember the other one, Lake maybe. There's a couple in there. But even as a prosecutor, I think what struck me is he was still on board with things like, voting to make anthrax. I mean fentanyl. Anthrax is what the governor called it, a misdemeanor to possess it. And other votes that he has taken on changes to our substantive criminal justice laws where I thought, dude, you're in the game. How do you make that vote?
I can't speak for Dylan, and I'm not going to attempt to. And everybody says he's a nice guy. However, nice guys don't always make good decisions. And the makeup bill that they passed this year that they're celebrating, and they being Dylan and the Dems, the majority party,
sounds like a band.
It was just that, right? It was a Band-Aid on an arterial bleed of poor decision-making 2 years prior.
That's a paramedic reference right there.
It is. I apologize. But fentanyl has been a problem in this region for 21 years. My second call in the ambulance was a fentanyl overdose. The problem is when they pass legislation like this Misdemeanor Reform Act, it opens up the gateways for it to explode and boom, coupled with other outside the state factors, and it's an epidemic, and we really need to get to the root of the problem, not just put Band-Aids on big bleeds.
Matt Solomon, did you get a chance to listen to President Joe Biden's campaign speech? I think it was a campaign speech. It didn't sound like anything else last night.
No, I was out knocking doors and meeting people in the district.
Well, I'm going to share with you this clip. You're a person who is in a position to move the dial just a little bit to the right from where it's been in the state of Colorado, specifically the state Senate, which I think the Republicans have a real chance of taking back, and that would provide a significant break on this leftward lurch of the state. But this red wave that we've been hearing about, I knew it was going to be muted in Colorado just because of our makeup anyway, but now we're starting to see efforts by the president, and he's starting to feel a little bit of a change in the polls and all this stuff. I still don't expect him to see him in the state of Colorado, but he's now making these speeches. And remember, when he took office, he was this great unifier. Everything was about, can't we all just get along? This is one clip from his speech yesterday, and I want to get your reaction to it, Matt.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Is that, one, how does that strike you? And two, is that your sense of the Republicans that you're hearing from and meeting and all that out there in the 8th?
No, George, the divisive banter coming from the media and from these speeches is what's tearing our state apart. And we've got to end this divisiveness. It flipping the Senate, electing me to represent Senate District 8 and the other candidates, we've got great candidates running for the Senate. That provides a backstop in our state government. And the state of Colorado that I know from when I moved here 26 years ago and from you growing up here, we've always been a balanced state. And we need good policy. And you don't get good policy without good conversation. And having a balanced legislature forces good conversation, which forces good policy. So I do not participate in the divisive banter. I don't even ask people their party affiliation when I talk to them because it doesn't matter. What matters is representing this district and representing the state in the best way possible.
How can people find out more about you?
SolomonForColorado.com. And my name is all O's. So SOLOMONFOR Colorado.com. Send me an email, reach out direct. I'm really excited for this race, and I'm really excited to serve Colorado. So thank you for having me on the show, George.
Absolutely, Matt. My hope is that what takes place on the campaign trail will provide enough fodder for book number 2, Why Did I Do This? Or whatever it's called. You know what I mean? Like Mistakes on the Campaign Trail by Matt Solomon.
It will start with the opening chapter of being on George Brachler's show.
That's a great response, man. Hey, Matt Solomon, Republican nominee for Senate District 8. Good luck to you. And, man, we'll probably have you back on after November, hopefully for a victory. Otherwise, we're going to get into more of the stuff. I just appreciate the candor of any politician who says, hey, look, here's my closet. I'm going to blow the door open. Take a look around and let me know what you think. I just wish we had more of that, regardless of party. One of the things that I started with Matt was a discussion of this speech yesterday that the president gave. It was bizarre. And I say that it was bizarre from the standpoint of someone who